Hi, guys. Today we're going to be talking about what is social class. Your reading today for the second module is what's class got to do with it, according to your syllabus here today. So we're going to be talking about classism today, and we'll also be talking about classism on September 2nd as well with your next reading. Capitalism Hits the Fan, and then we'll wrap up social class on September 9th with cause of death inequality. So today the reading is What's Class Got to Do with It out of your textbook, The Meaning of Difference, which is the book assigned for this course. It's on page 127, the 7th edition. So when we're talking about social class, we're talking about the division of how folks in our country are divided. So the best example I could do is like the pyramid that we frequently see when we're talking about different classes of which people rank in based on wealth and income and social status and education status. You'll have like at the very bottom the poor, and then working class right above them, then the middle class, then the upper class, and then the upper class, which is usually that 1% of folks who have like 40% control over things, okay? So in this reading by Michael Ziewig, class is central to our everyday lives, yet class has not been as visible as race or gender. Yet not nearly as much a part of our conversations and sense of ourselves as these and other identities. We are, of course, all individuals, but our individuality and personal life chances are shaped, limited, or enhanced by the economic and social class in which we have grown up and in which we exist as adults. So we are inevitably shaped by our social class. It actually defines much of our identity, how we respond to the things that we are involved in, because it dictates what types of things we can be involved in. If you live in an area that doesn't have access to certain resources, opportunities for someone who does have access to them aren't an opportunity for you. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume you're saying yes. Okay. Gender and race are abstractions, yet they are powerful, concrete influences in everyone's lives. They carry significant meaning despite wide differences in experience within the population of men, women, whites, and blacks. So if based only on direct observation of skin color, you knew there were white people and black people, but you didn't know about race in modern society, you would be ignorant of one of the most important determinants of the experience of those white and black folks. Okay. Let's some other areas here. When people in the United States talk about class, it is often in ways that hide its most important parts. We tend to think about class in terms of income or the lifestyles that income can buy, but class can be better understood as mainly a question of economic and political power. So class isn't just solely about how much money you make or what you think you're worth. It also ties that economic portion with the political power that's given to that economic structure, okay? Just think about it. People who have more access to wealth, who have that wealth and that income, typically have more power politically. How many, in the last, 50 years, how many people have been elected to the presidency who were poor or working class? Think about that, okay? Think about that. Power doesn't exist alone within an individual or a group. Power exists as a relationship between and among different people or groups. This means that we cannot talk about one class of people alone without looking at relationships between that class and others. So power does exist in relationship to us and others, okay, and to things that we have access to. In the United States, working class people are by far the majority of the population. Over 88 million people were in working class occupations in 2002, comprising 62% of the labor force. The capitalist class, those most senior executives who direct and control the corporations that employ the private sector working class, is actually the smallest group, but yet they have the most power. Okay, that's just that just always blows my mind away. The capitalists comprise about 2% of the U.S. labor force. but yet they have the most power because they have the most access to the wealth. And let's see here. Of the over 21 million business enterprises in the United States, only 16,000 employ that many. They are controlled by around 200,000 people, fewer than 0.2% of the 1% of the labor force. In fact, if we count only those people who sit on multiple boards, so-called interlocking directors, they could all fit into Yankee Stadium. They and the top political leaders in all branches of the federal government constitute a U.S. ruling class at the pinnacle of national power. So capitalists are rich, of course, and they have access to the power. And they're the smallest group of people in our nation. In between the capitalists and the working classes is the middle class. The middle class gets a lot of attention in the media and political commentary in the U.S., but this term is almost always used to describe people in the middle of the income distribution. You notice how when people are talking, they frequently say the middle class, like politicians always say, we want to be the voice for the middle class. That seems to be the catch-all phrase. They want to talk about those folks, but the middle class actually doesn't make up the majority of the classes. More people, I believe, are working class than they are middle class. Now, middle class is high, but it's not the highest. The middle class includes professional people like doctors, lawyers, accountants, and university professors. Most people in the, quote, professional middle class are not self-employed. They work for private companies or public agencies. They receive salaries, and they answer to supervisors. In these ways, they are like workers. But if we compare professional middle class people with well-paid workers, we see important differences. A unionized auto assembly worker doing a lot of overtime makes enough money to live the lifestyle of a middle-class worker, even more money than some professors or lawyers. But a well-paid unionized machinist or electrician or auto worker is still part of the working class. Professors and lawyers have a degree of autonomy and control at work that auto workers don't have. The difference is a question of class. So what they're saying here is that you could be a machinist or an electrician and make just as much money as a lawyer or a professor. But the difference is that lawyers and professors have more autonomy, meaning that when they go to work, they can sometimes most of the time, set their own hours, decide what cases to take or what classes they want to teach, what time they want to teach them. Whereas a machinist or electrician, even though they're making just as much money, they have to clock in and clock out at certain times. So what we see here, the differentiation is not the money in this sense, but the ability to do your work when you want to, that freedom, that autonomy, okay? And that's a resource. That's an opportunity that not everybody has. For example, let's take the pandemic right now. Right now, there are folks who are stressing out considerably if school doesn't start back normally because they don't have access to childcare and they have to clock in and clock out and go to work. And they can't leave their children unattended, and there's limited daycares, and there's no school going back. It's going virtual. So in those people's situations, they have to make a very difficult decision. They have to either quit their job, which then puts them in a whole nother bracket of poverty, or they have to put their children's life at risk by hiring somebody potentially that they don't know very well, or who may be contagious and be carrying the virus, the coronavirus, to watch their kids. So this creates issues just through freedom. There's some people who are not worried about going back to school for their kids because they have the ability to choose their hours so they can be home while the other parent's at work and they can switch off. So right there, autonomy is an access. It's a resource that's accessible to certain class of folks. The middle class also includes supervisors in the business world, ranging from line foremen to senior managers, below the top decision-making executives. As with the professional middle class, some people in the supervisory middle class are close to working people in income and lifestyle. Let's see here. What else do I want you guys to know? There are different types of middle classes, so make sure you're aware of the different types of middle class folks. So one we have one class of foreman is not a worker when it comes to the power grid. The foreman is on the floor to represent the owner, to execute orders in the management chain of command. The foreman is in the middle between the workers and the owners. When a worker becomes a supervisor, he or she enters the middle class. But just as the well-paid middle-class worker is atypical, so working-class bosses make up a small fraction of supervisory and managerial personnel in the U.S. economy. We see something similar with small business owners, which is the third component of the middle class. Let's see. The other end of the business scale, senior managers and high-level corporate attorneys and accountants share quite a bit with the capitalists they serve. They have considerable authority, make a lot of money, and revolve in the same social circles, but they are not the final decision makers, which is a differentiation with their classes. In all three sections of the middle class, professional middle class, supervisor middle class, and small business owner middle class, there are fuzzy borders with the working class and with the capitalist. Yet the difference in power, independence, and life circumstances among these classes support the idea of a separate middle class. The middle class is about 36% of the labor force in the U.S., sizable but far from the majority and far from the typical American. So we're looking at 36% of the labor force is the middle class. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. Make sure you've read this. I've provided this mini explanation lecture for those of you who are not able to attend class in person. Okay, take care.